You are running yourself into the ground, but your metabolic engine is stuck in neutral. If you're over 35, you've tried the long runs, the daily treadmill, the relentless, sweat more, mantra, and the stubborn belly fat laughs at you. Today I want to show you why that happens, using hard physiology, not hype. There's a persistent myth in the fitness world: more intensity, more sweat, more fat loss. That's seductive because it's simple. But human bioenergetics aren't a thermostat you crank up. At high intensities, your zone 3 and zone 4 efforts, the body's quickest pathway to power is glycolysis, fast carbohydrate breakdown to pyruvate and lactate. That's why sprinting or intense intervals feel like a sugar burn. You literally shift engines from fat to carbohydrate. In short, sweat is fluid loss and thermoregulation. It's not a direct tracer for adipose oxidation. This is the gray zone workouts that are too hard to be true aerobic work, and too easy to build high-end capacity. They give the feeling of effort without teaching your muscles to become fat-burning machines. Gray zone sessions chronically stress the system, robbing recovery time from the very mitochondrial adaptations you need for long-term metabolic change. Now, cortisol. It's a critical hormone for acute survival. It mobilizes glucose and transiently supports performance. But repeated spikes without proper recovery push the body into a protective stance. Chronic or frequent high-intensity stress increases glucocorticoid exposure in tissues and shifts fat partitioning toward visceral depots, the deep belly fat that is metabolically active and insulin-resistant. So paradoxically, if you chronically stress yourself with the wrong type or dose of cardio, you may be signaling the body to hold onto the very visceral fat you want to lose. Here's the practical takeaway before we move on. Intensity is a tool, not a hammer. If your goal is to unlock stubborn belly fat and reset metabolic age, you must stop equating pain with progress. In the next section, we'll walk through the alternative. Zone 2, the low-effort, high-return strategy that trains your body to burn fat, clears lactate, and literally grows the cellular machinery you need. Let's be precise. Zone 2 feet is moderate aerobic work, roughly 60 to 70% of your maximal heart rate, the pace you can maintain for a long time and still hold a conversation. It's not easy, but it is sustainable. The metabolic state where your body preferentially oxidizes lipids and trains the aerobic machinery. In practice, use a heart rate monitor, or the simple talk test. You should be breathing heavier than rest but able to form full sentences without gasping. Mechanically, Zone 2 recruits slow twitch, type 1 muscle fibers, the fibers that are dense with mitochondria and specialized for sustained fat oxidation. These fibers use fatty acids and intramuscular triglycerides as primary fuels at this intensity. With repeated Zone 2 stimulus, they increase their capacity to store and burn fat, shifting your whole body substrate preference away from sugar and toward fat during everyday activities. For decades, lactate was dismissed as waste. That's wrong. Lactate is a mobile fuel and signaling molecule. During higher intensities, lactate production rises, and Zone 2 trains the body to clear and reutilize lactate, shuttling it into oxidative fibers and into the mitochondrial reticulum where it's converted back to pyruvate and oxidized. That lactate clearance improves recovery between efforts and increases the net amount of substrate your muscles can oxidize over time. Think of Zone 2 as a metabolic vacuum. It pulls lactate and free fatty acids into oxidative pathways at a rate that high-intensity work does not. This vacuum reduces circulating lactate, speeds phosphocreatine and pH recovery, and lowers perceived fatigue for subsequent sessions. In athletes and regular exercisers, that improved clearance translates to more volume, better sustained intensity, and greater cumulative fat oxidation across the week. Longer term, consistent Zone 2 training signals mitochondrial biogenesis, literally increasing the number and functional capacity of mitochondria. Mechanisms include repeated increases in cellular AMP, ADP ratios, calcium flux, and activation of transcriptional co-activators like PGC1-alpha that coordinate mitochondrial DNA transcription and protein synthesis. The result: more engines per muscle cell, higher maximal fat oxidation, and improved metabolic flexibility. You can switch between sugar and fat depending on demand. How do you know it's working? Look for lower steady-state heart rate at the same pace, faster lactate clearance after hard efforts, longer time to fatigue, and a shift on fat oxidation curves. Your maximal fat oxidation rate, MFO, increases and the intensity at which it occurs moves to a higher absolute workload. Anecdotally, you'll feel less hangry between meals and observe improvements in resting metabolic markers over months. In short, Zone 2 is the work that grows mitochondria, converts lactate into fuel, and trains type 1 fibers to hoard and burn fat. It's the metabolic primer, the engine building phase you must prioritize before you add intense intervals. Next, I'll show you why mobilizing fat is only half the battle, because that fat still needs a working filter, your liver. Up to now, everything sounds encouraging. Zone 2 mobilizes fat. It increases mitochondrial density. It clears lactate. But here's the pivot, and this is where most people get stuck without realizing it. Mobilizing fat is not the same thing as eliminating fat. When you liberate fatty acids from adipose tissue, they don't vanish. They enter circulation. And almost all of them converge on a single organ that decides their fate, the liver. Physiologically, the liver is the central metabolic traffic controller. Fatty acids arriving from fat cells are either oxidized for energy, converted into ketone bodies, packaged into lipoproteins, or, if capacity is exceeded, re-esterified and sent back out for storage. When liver mitochondrial function is robust, fat becomes fuel. When liver function is compromised, fat becomes trafficked, circulating, inflaming tissues, and ultimately returning to storage depots. Here's the hidden problem. The modern adult liver is under constant chemical load. Ultra-processed foods, alcohol, endocrine-disrupting plastics, pesticides, air pollutants. These compounds are lipophilic. They dissolve into fat. Over time, they accumulate in hepatic tissue, impair mitochondrial enzymes, and blunt fat oxidation. This is why non-alcoholic fatty liver disease now affects a staggering percentage of adults, many of whom exercise regularly. This explains the frustrating plateau. You do the cardio. You even do Zone 2. Fat is released, but the liver can't fully process it. So circulating fatty acids rise, insulin signaling worsens, and the body responds defensively by pushing fat back into storage, often viscerally. From the brain's perspective, this is logical. Unprocessed fat plus toxins equals danger. Storage becomes containment. Now layer stress on top of this. Elevated cortisol increases hepatic glucose output and alters lipid handling. A stressed liver becomes more gluconeogenic and less efficient at fat oxidation. This creates a vicious loop. Stress impairs liver function. Impaired liver function worsens metabolic stress, and the signal to store visceral fat gets louder. This is why some of the hardest training individuals develop the most stubborn central adiposity. This is the key reframe. Zone 2 is the mechanical stimulus. It liberates fat and builds engines. But the liver is the chemical filter. If the filter is clogged, no amount of mechanical work solves the problem. You don't fix a polluted engine by revving it harder. You fix the filtration system. So the question becomes, how do you restore hepatic fat processing capacity so Zone 2 can actually do what it's designed to do? That's where the concept of hepatic optimization comes in, and it's the missing link for most people chasing fat loss and metabolic longevity. We've shown you the mechanical side. Zone 2 frees fat and builds the mitochondrial engine. But an engine needs clean fuel and a working filter. The liver is the filter. If you want Zone 2 to translate into durable visceral fat loss and improved metabolic age, you must optimize hepatic function. Not with guesswork, but with targeted biology. Nutrients that support hepatic oxidation, VLDL export, mitochondrial enzyme activity, and antioxidant defense. Practically, hepatic optimization means three things. 1. Restore mitochondrial capacity in hepatocytes so fatty acids can be oxidized into ATP or ketones. 2. Support methylation and VLDL assembly so the liver can export excess triglycerides safely. And 3. Reduce oxidative and inflammatory burden so enzymes and organelles operate normally. There are specific, well-studied nutrients that map to each of these functions. First, silymarin. Decades of preclinical and several clinical studies show silymarin has antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and antifibrotic actions in the liver. Mechanistically, it stabilizes hepatocyte membranes, scavenges free radicals, and appears to improve histologic markers in NAFLD, meaning it helps the liver tolerate and recover from metabolic stress so oxidation pathways can function better. Second, betaine. Betaine is a methyl donor that supports hepatic 1-carbon metabolism and, crucially, VLDL assembly and export. In animal and human studies, betaine supplementation improves hepatic triglyceride handling and reduces steatosis. In other words, it helps the liver package and ship fat instead of re-esterifying and returning it to storage. Third, berberine. This botanical alkaloid activates AMPK, the same energy sensor that shifts cells from lipogenesis toward oxidation. Clinical trials show berberine improves insulin sensitivity, reduces hepatic lipogenesis, and can lower liver fat in NAFLD cohorts. Mechanistically, berberine helps turn on the liver's burn switch and modulates the gut-liver axis, which further supports metabolic function. Fourth, Camellia sinensis, primarily EGCG. Green tea polyphenols have antioxidant, anti-inflammatory effects and in animal and human studies reduce hepatic triglycerides and improve liver enzyme profiles. EGCG supports mitochondrial function and may blunt oxidative damage that otherwise disables hepatic beta oxidation. Put simply, Zone 2 is the mechanical engine that mobilizes fat and builds muscle mitochondria. The nutrient blend, silymarin, betaine, berberine, EGCG, is the chemical catalyst that restores hepatic oxidation, export, and antioxidant defense. Combined, they turn a transient release of fatty acids into irreversible clearance instead of recirculation and storage. This is where I introduce a practical formulation that maps exactly to these mechanisms, the Liver Purification Complex, marketed as Live Pure. It blends standardized silymarin, clinically meaningful doses of betaine, berberine extracts, and green tea polyphenols to target oxidation, export, AMPK activation, and antioxidant defense. In other words, it's a mechanistic complement to Zone 2 training, the chemical filter you can reasonably add to your daily routine while you prioritize sleep, nutrition, and exercise. Important: supplements are adjuncts, not magic bullets. EGCG at very high supplemental doses can stress the liver in some individuals. Berberine interacts with medications and can lower blood sugar. Silymarin and betaine can interact with certain drug pathways. Always verify product quality, third-party testing, use evidence-based dosing, and consult your clinician, especially if you take prescription meds, are pregnant, or have pre-existing liver disease. If you want the protocol, how to dose Zone 2, when to take the hepatic complex, and how to monitor progress without guesswork, I'll map the weekly plan and tracking metrics next. We've covered mechanism and the missing chemical filter. Now, a concrete, evidence-informed, safety-first protocol you can actually use. This is not hype. It's a reproducible template that combines 180 minutes of Zone 2 work per week with a targeted liver support regimen, objective monitoring, and physician oversight. Target: 180 minutes of Zone 2 per week. That's a practical sweet spot, inside WHO guidance, and gives meaningful volume without excessive stress. Options: 3 60-minute sessions, e.g., brisk cycling, rowing, hiking, or 6 30-minute sessions if you want more frequency with shorter duration. Keep intensity at approximately 60 to 70% of your HR max. The talk test is a pragmatic check. Use the Tanaka equation to estimate HR max, 208 minus 0.7 times age, then multiply by 0.60 to 0.70 for your Zone 2 window. Session template: 8 to 10 minute easy warm-up, 40 to 50 minutes steady Zone 2, 5 to 10 minute cool down. If you're time crunched, 30 minutes is valid, but be consistent. No pounding hills or frequent surges inside those sessions. You want steady aerobic economy. Track effort with HR or perceived exertion, RPE approximately equals 4-5/10. Aim for cumulative weekly time rather than daily perfection. Daily hepatic support, morning with food, is the chemical half of this equation. Based on clinical studies and safety literature, here are target ranges you can discuss with your clinician. Silymarin, milk thistle, 140 mg 3 times per day, approximately equals 420 mg per day, is a commonly used clinical regimen. Many trials use 140 mg TID. Betaine, clinical supplementation ranges from approximately 2.5 to 6 grams per day, commonly 2.5 to 3 grams per day in maintenance. Split doses with meals. Berberine, 500 mg twice daily with meals is the usual clinical starting point in trials for metabolic endpoints. Some protocols use 500 mg 3 times daily but start lower to assess tolerance. EGCG, green tea extract, keep supplemental EGCG conservative, approximately equals as less than or equal to 300 to 375 mg per day. To minimize rare hepatotoxic risk, brewed green tea, 2-4 cups, is safe for most people. These amounts mirror clinical trials and safety reviews. Again, consult your clinician before starting any of these. Safety first. Berberine interacts with CYP enzymes and can alter statin, anticoagulant and diabetes medication effects. It can lower blood glucose and blood pressure. Be cautious if you're medicated. EGCG has rare reports of liver injury at high supplemental doses, NGT, 800 mg per day. Keep doses conservative and stop if you experience unexplained jaundice, persistent nausea, or dark urine. Silymarin is generally well tolerated but monitor LFTs if you have liver disease. Don't mix or start these compounds without medical oversight. Measure to know. Baseline and follow up at 8 to 12 weeks. Waist circumference, single best pragmatic visceral proxy, body composition if available, resting heart rate and hour at fixed test pace, and simple performance markers, time to steady state at a fixed workload. Lab monitoring. ALT, AST, GGT, fasting glucose, fasting insulin right pointing arrow calculate HOMA-IR, lipid panel. If concerned about liver fat, consider ultrasound or fibroscan. For research-grade precision you'd use MRI-PDFF. For metabolic signal of hepatic oxidation, optional home blood ketones, beta-hydroxybutyrate, can be informative. Higher fasting ketones after a period of adaptation indicate increased hepatic fat oxidation. Expect adaptations on different time frames. Improved HR at the same pace and perceived endurance in 4 to 8 weeks. Measurable shifts in lactate handling and mitochondrial markers after approximately 8 to 12 weeks. And meaningful reductions in liver fat and HOMA-IR typically require 12 weeks or more combined with dietary change. If you aren't seeing objective improvement at 12 weeks, reassess dose, adherence, and medical confounders. Final framing. Zone 2 is the mechanical engine. It frees fat and builds mitochondrial capacity. A healthy liver is the chemical filter. It decides whether that fat becomes fuel or remains a problem. Use both. Steady aerobic volume plus targeted hepatic support, measured with objective metrics, and supervised by your clinician. Don't train harder. Train smarter. Fix the engine first. I quit running to run my metabolism better. Start with Zone 2, support your liver, and the stubborn belly fat stops being stubborn. Disclaimer. This video is for educational purposes only and is not medical advice. Exercise, nutrition, and supplements affect individuals differently. Consult a qualified healthcare professional before starting any new exercise or supplement program, especially if you have a medical condition, take prescription medications, or are pregnant or nursing. Always prioritize your long-term health.